Now in today's mail, I got something really nice. This is going to be an interesting exercise, and today's a good day to do it. The reason is, this is really important. Watching the weather every day, of course. Tomorrow, it's supposed to go up to 50 degrees. Can you imagine? I mean, it's like we're living in sunny California. Anyway, these came in the mail. They're two Brian Ether props. And what I wanted to do, I thought, and these are Rich Wallbridge's props. What we're going to do is pitch them, balance them, get them ready. We're going to put them on a Spitfire, which has Rich Wallbridge's engine and pipe. And we're going to get, if it's a flyable day tomorrow, get some feedback for him. So he can put these on, because basically he's going to put them on that engine combo anyway. And what I'd try to do here is make one a little higher pitch. In other words, I have a gauge where I would like my props pitched, and I will make one a tad faster and a tad slower. The reason is, in sunny California, where he's going to be using these, what's going to happen is the air density is a lot less, the temperature is higher. So he's going to need a tad more pitch. And the one with just a little bit less pitch, I will make just a tad less pitch, and that'll probably work good or we'll go back and forth until we get it to work in 50-degree weather, which is what we may have tomorrow. Now, depending on how good the weather is, and I really hope it is going to be a great flyable day. The problem is the weathermen always lie. But even if they do, I got this in the bank ready to go. And then once I get this all set up for tomorrow's session, what I can do is spend some time doing any work that still has to be done. There's a bunch of little details. Or I can look at my list of things that I want to make up, little parts. For instance, I can make the push rod for the other bell crank. Because before we go to putting the gear blocks, and actually I could do the inboard tip too. The thing that I can't do the gear blocks because we're waiting for Joe on the session that he's here. And that may be coming up in a few days, I hope. Haven't heard from him yet. But what I want to do is, then I want to get his input on this spinner thing. But in the meantime, we got Rich's props. In fact, we got even if we don't have a flyable day, I can do this without it even being a flyable day and mark the props. But let's go through a little exercise. Let's just pretend you just ordered two props from Brian Ether. These are basically 14 5.5. These would probably work stock on an engine that was running similar to 8,500, 8,000. But we know with the pipe we're going to be wanting to run about 9,000. So both of these are going to require a little bit of handiwork. And let me just show how I go about doing this. Now I still have some props that need to be deflashed here. All of the props, and I made a bunch for Richard Oliver, a bunch for myself, a bunch for Kent Tyser, among other people. I got a couple of 4-blades. I got some 4-blades I sent down to Mike Scott for his 90. The thing with all props, no matter who makes the props, you've got to work them and customize them for your particular needs. And this is what I want to try to go about doing here today. But let's pretend this is the first time you ever bought a prop from Brian Ether. This is how you would go about doing it. Now, basically, depending on who actually makes the props, these are a couple of things to keep in mind. A pair of rubber gloves, actually a pair of heavy-duty gloves is even better because these are razor edges. Where they call this the flashing out of the mold, that flashing is like a razor blade, and so I very carefully would want to remove this. That is about, for me anyway, about an hour a prop that I spend prepping it. In other words, a raw prop that comes from Brian or from Bali, or if I mold it, there's still an hour of work. And it's a lot of hand labor. I want to, number one, carefully, and a new blade doesn't last long when you do this. Now, a lot of times, you can get 80 or 90% of it with a blade if you're real careful. Now, the advantage of doing it with a blade, there's no dust to breathe. Every blade is different. This one has a tremendous amount of, this is the resin that's squeezed out. And we're going to have to relieve this because it's going to go on a road jet. So we always relieve this. This part of it, I would say an hour a prop. If you're new to it, it's going to be more than an hour a prop. Front surface really doesn't look too bad on these. Now, usually Brian's props they're real nice on one side. What he does he puts a gloss finish, for lack of a better word, on one side. And that's what that looks like. But the back side is where he's expecting you to do all the balancing. So you can see we have one side, it's got a lot of flash. One side, I'm down to where I have almost no flash. Now, when I get to that point, the last little bit you really can't conveniently get. Now, if it were a little bit nicer outside, I would do this outside. I can do it over by my vacuuming bench, but I can't get the camera up close the way the thing is set. So what I want to do is, I just want to bring this out to where I don't have any flashing. Carbide block, sanding block. I'm not looking to change any shape here. Not looking to impart a change of shape. I want to get rid of the flashing. And again, if you allow yourself about an hour of prop, you'll find out, once you make the little gauge, and we'll go through this, once you know what gear that model should be in, and I have the Testarossa gauge, I think I still have it set for this exact prop, in fact. Now, out at the tip, there's always a little overage, what I call overage, where it oozes out of the mold. For our purposes right now, since we haven't trued up the diameter, and it's usually off by a little bit, that's just the way it is. But getting rid of all of the excess flashing to start with, and you really have to do one blade at a time. In fact, I'll do one blade complete, and you can pretty much figure out there we're going to be doing 4 blades. Or if this were a 4 or 3 bladed prop, you can figure out how much extra work that would be. Now the idea is right in by the hub, there's a big piece that usually is part of the flash process. If you don't delude yourself that a blade is going to last very long, cut in carbon fiber. These props are made out of EPON. Now the other trick is, right now while you have the hub flat like this, I want to burnish it. That means I want to get rid of any of the edge. Again, this is just rough. The final last little bit we'll do over on our sanding bench. But this is getting rid of most of the flash on one side. Because this prop has a little more flashing than I've seen on Brian's props in the past. This is an appropriate way to do it. Now there's always, if you want the whole enchilada, needless to say, the prop video is a good choice. Now I can see I still have a little lip here. For right now, for the purposes of right now, we just want to get this where the flashing is not part of the prop. Now these still have razor edges everywhere, and I want to be super careful around any of the edges that I don't have. You can pick this up and cut an artery. It's like handling a sword in the very beginning. And if you're not shooting video, do not forget to wear a mask. This stuff is not good to breathe. Now there's still some PVA, that's molding release agent, on the back of the blade. Blade's relatively flat right now. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but before I go to the next step on this is going to be to dress off all of the material that he uses as release agent, and I'm assuming that's PVA. Now the next step on this, I want to get all of the release agent off, just a piece of ordinary 220 sandpaper, and real carefully. Now if you run your finger on this and you get a splinter, you'll probably only do that once. Of course I've done it 25 times because I'm careless, not paying attention, phone is ringing, Karen's making soup, birds are chirping, there's something always going on here. But if I just get the back of the blade to where it's dull, then I know I've got that part of it done. I'm not going to do this to the front of the blade. All the material is going to come off of the back. Unless we have one that's radically out of balance, and almost always, I would say 90% of the time, Brian Ether props are pretty well symmetrical, that one blade doesn't wind up being a ton heavier. Now once I get it flat, again, we haven't even talked about the pitch yet. I want to get a little radius on the edge, just a little bit. And you can see I've still got a little shiny spot up there. Well, I want to get rid of that. And what I need is a little sanding block. In this case, we just happen to have this little guy. And I can work, because these are undercambered props. I really can't do this with a flat blade, with a flat sanding block. Yeah, but I've got most of that. Okay, now I have, in here I still have to do, again, this is where you make yourself a few little sanding tools worth the weight in gold. If you have a good Wilson mask, this is a good time to snap in a new set of cartridges. Even better if you can do it outside. It's raining out there right now, and I don't know if it's going to rain all day or what, but they said it's going to be nice tomorrow. Now, on the front of this, I'm not going to touch this yet because this still has some parting agent on it. But I do want to have the back dull. For right now, the back being dull, front being flat. Next step on this is to do the other 3 blades. That would be the normal thing I would want to do. But for right now, I want to take this over to the sink and just see if this is normal parting agent, and it looks like it is. I don't know if you can see it. It looks like saran wrap coming off. Now normally, well, we don't even have to go to the sink. Normally PVA, because it's water. It's a water-based product. Let's just see if Brian's changed his release agent. Nah, comes right off. So when we're done, we usually wind up with one shiny blade. If we get, oh, I know that's PVA now because I could feel it just turns to chewing gum, which is what PVA normally does. He's PVA on this side of the mold. Well, he's actually doing both sides. But this side, for cosmetic reasons, I'd like to leave nice and shiny. That would be like a free lunch thing. The back is where we're going to do all our balancing, trimming, and we're going to radius the edge of this extremely carefully. So now we've got on a much nicer finish than we originally started with. Now here's where one of these tools that I've used, it's the handle of an X-Acto knife. It comes right in here. You can see I still have a shiny spot. The reason I like this dull is the shiny spots show me where I haven't got it smoothed out yet. And this is probably a lot more for cosmetic reasons or pride reasons, or just that you want to have the prop look halfway decent, but it serves an ulterior purpose too. When the prop has a nice finish on it, you can see any chips, any cracks, anything that looks like it needs your attention. And anytime you hit a stone or you see the edge of a prop getting chewed up, be sure to check it, rebalance it, and if it's got a split, either throw it away or cut it down to where the split ends and use it for, in this case, we could make a 40 prop out of it. Now I've got the whole bottom of one blade done. I have to work on the other blade now, do basically the same thing, and then I'll have the cosmetically attractive side and one side that I can use to do all my modifying and balancing. Now you would think this is not a big deal, but to me, I find it to be a tremendous big deal. When this is smooth, you really have a problem if the knurl on the spinner, backplate, or the engine doesn't catch, and especially on this side, it's very vulnerable. Without knurls there, if you just put a flat washer on this and a motor backfires, and I bet you've seen it happen on one of the other, maybe 10 videos ago, the whole front end flew off the plane. This surface had gotten so smooth from changing props. Now this is something I do on an ongoing basis. Every time I have the prop off the plane, I re-etch it, and I got that $10 engraving tool that you can buy anywhere, and make a sunburst. And obviously, the washer that goes on it should have the same knurled, rough, whatever you want to call it, edges. Now, if you just go back and look at the smooth side, this isn't trued up yet. This is kind of a concave, but I want to sand it on a sanding table until I get this edge flat, because I want to have a flat prop bite. Getting these to bite on any high-performance engine, it doesn't matter what size, Any engine, even a 40 that pops back and that prop comes out, it can take your eye out. And you just saw me get injured. I got my on-the-job scar healing up real nice now. Luckily, I didn't need any stitches. Karen would have went wild. I look enough like Frankenstein as it is. Now on the sanding bench, I got that real nice and flat. This last little bit we're going to machine away. I got a little tool because a Rojet, the crankshaft sticks out just a little bit, and using some different spinners, there can be an interference fit. So I have a little tool that takes care of that. Again, I'm going back to my original tool because I see a couple of shiny spots, and it's at this point in time I want the whole back of the prop to be dull before I start the balancing operation. Now, it really doesn't matter. I haven't found the big deal if you balance it first or pitch it first. It's a 6 of one, half a dozen of another, but I think if you're really smart, or if you really have some high-tech reason to do it, you know, do it the way that makes you happy. But now I've got all the edges radiused. I actually can rub my hand on there. I've got all material and PVA off. I have to now etch this side, same as I did this. I'll do that off camera, and we'll be ready to pitch this up. Now the next thing you do is you take a piece of spare motor mount. Doesn't matter, doesn't even have to be a good one. Put a 1/4-inch bolt in one end. When we lay that on there and I pull back, because there's always a couple of thousandths of clearance, I pull back, I can see this prop is a tad less than 14. Now what I want to do is I want to very carefully mark where the tip of this prop is. And I'm just a pen line under 14, probably because I've got a little bit of clearance here. I want to spin this around. And again, Brian Ethers are more accurate, I think, than some other brands, but it's always good to check it. And this is a simple diameter gauge. It shows these are all the different props we use, the 90s, down around 14, and then you could actually glue a ruler up here if you wanted to. See, here's the thing too. You can always take and make yourself. You can always use a Prather gauge. You can always use Alan Ressinger makes an excellent gauge. It's a very involved, complex thing to use those gauges. It takes a lot of time. The way I do it is kind of simple. I have a very simple formula, and I'm not going to go into a 2-hour discussion because it's all on the prop video. But the way to make this work is, I'm only concerned with the last inch because that travels through the air at about 700 miles an hour and does 99% of the work. If you're a speed flyer, or in Richard Oliver's case, he's always dealing with very low air density, and he's a very technical person. But what I'm looking to get across to the average person is how to get the prop that it's not going too fast or too slow, too much engine load, not enough, and get right to the middle. Then that last little fine tuning, you could spend the rest of your life doing that. But getting it right. Now, how many people have I seen that go out? A typical thing is they have never run a pipe engine. They run it, and they just have a prop that belongs on a Tiger 60 on it, and they're going 100 miles an hour. Well, what we're trying to do is get ballpark numbers. Get people into the ballpark. The fine tuning is infinite, and it never ends, because the fine tuning part, when we get it in the ballpark where we can fly at 50 degrees and it's good till about 90, and then we go to Houston, it's 100, 105, we need a prop with more pitch. Gets below 50, those days when everybody's got a jacket on, you really need a little less pitch. So if you had 3 props, you'd be covered for a big wide range of situations. Now when it comes to prop pitching, simplest thing is you just make a gauge. In this case, this one is the 90 for the 4-blade. It's got a little piece of plywood that broke off, so I'm really going to have to redo this. But nothing elaborate, nothing expensive. You can see how many times I've changed the prop pitch on this one. This is for the Doran 3 blades. Changed it 100 times. Here we have the one for the 2-blade 14-inch. Now, if you make this gauge up, all you have to do, and it's as simple as can be, I want to be an inch less. You drill for a piece of tubing or a bolt, glue it in. No money, and you can make one for each plane if you so desire. This fits over there. I press down on the hub because that's why I wanted it flat. Now I can look up and see. You see how the leading edge of the prop is a little bit off the gauge? So I know this prop has a little bit too much pitch. So what I want to do is just heat with a heat gun and put that down to where it goes. I don't know if you can really see that. I have a little bit more pitch than I need. What I want is that. Too much, that's more pitch than what I'm used to using. And this is my gauge for the Roadjet 76. Now, I'll start with the numbers that I have on this gauge. And what I'll do is I'll make one prop the thickness of a piece of paper thicker on the back, and one the thickness of a piece of paper bigger on the front. And then whichever one works the best, I can use that as my square one prop. But this is relatively straightforward, relatively easy. The gauge is easy and inexpensive to make, but all you need to know in the beginning is if you look down here, you can see under the leading edge, and when I heat the prop and bend it, I want it flat. I want it flat. When I'm done, I'll just exaggerate this. That's what I'm dealing with now. I have too much pitch. I'm going to heat the blade and bend it and get it flat with this gauge. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do you know how to make the gauge? Well, you've got to play around with different props until you find one that runs pretty much that you're happy with. Then in this case, I would make this gauge up. In this case, this is our Testarossa gauge. And we've had several props, Doran's props, this one, the 3-blade ethers. When they're set to this gauge, they all seem to be in the ballpark. So that works very well for me. And again, the nice part I like is when I don't have to spend a lot of money to make a very simple tool I can make in 8-10 minutes. It works perfectly and it gets me in the ballpark. Then the fine tuning, that can go on infinitely. The fine tuning has a lot to do with where you're flying, what day it is, what the air density is, the temperature, and your skill level. So that could go on forever. But getting it in the ballpark, I think I can do it pretty much in 1 or 2 shots. And then Mitch Walbridge, this might save him, it could save him a year at the field, back and forth, because he can always send me a prop and I can always pitch it up to my gauge. And I can always make it a hair up or a hair down. And once I have the gauge, and I've changed it several times according to changes in the plane. A heavy plane usually needs a little more pitch, a lighter plane, a little less pitch. Cold weather, less pitch, warm weather, more pitch, but infinitely like needle valve clicks. But first you got to get it into the motor run area. Now the other thing is we know this prop from having run 76s several years. We know this prop is a real good load on a 76. So what it allows us to, we don't have to deal with diameter now. We can run the full-size prop. But if this were a 15-inch prop, I'd be starting at 15 and a half, 15 and a quarter, 14 and a half, 14 and a quarter, until I got the load right to where I had my engine run back. That nice, clean 2.4 brake. So once the next I'm going to do is get the heat gun and put some pitch in this, get it pitched very close to what I know the gauge that I'm very comfortable with. And this, once you get a gauge for a plane, if your next plane is very similar, in fact, in our case, like Joe's Spitfire and my Spitfire, we probably can use the same gauge. We probably only have to make one gauge and then replicate it. Because I could send somebody a prop that has the right pitch, and you could make this gauge, put your little slot on the end, flat with the bottom of the prop, send me back the prop, and you got a copy of my gauge. Or whatever. It gives us a lot of tuning choices for very little money, and it really gets it 99% right off the bat. It's a good system. Kind of 101. Now, if you've never pitched a prop before, there's a real easy way to do it. But I prefer the way that I'm going to show. You can take boiling water. When the water is making bubbles, put it in a cup. Dip the prop in, the last 3 or 4 inches, and count to 5. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Take it out, and this will be like rubber, and you can move it. And you want to go very little at a time. You don't want to take the prop and just put a twist in it like it's a pretzel. The way I like to do, and this was one of Richard Oliver's little things that I picked up from Texas, why I love going to Texas, one of the reasons. This is a heat gun from Sears Roebuck. Now believe me, this is not a hairdryer. This you can put up against something, you could just melt it. So I want to really be careful in terms of, I don't want to overdo the heat. I'd rather go back and do it 2 or 3 times if I have to. Especially an undercambered prop. Undercambered props always have what amounts to be a, well, usually that's enough. And I know I'm trying to, oh yeah, see, now if you get to the point where you can hold your hand on it, it's not going to change. You've got to have it that it's burning your hand, because this resin softens at 165 degrees, and most normal people get burned at 165 degrees. Now I've gone an incremental little amount, tiny amount, and I'm looking down, and I've taken about half of the amount of the pitch that I want to take out. So it's better to sneak up on it, I think anyway, than it is to go the other way and just have too much. Again, be careful. A heat gun really can do some work. There we go. Now the whole thing is like butter. And I want to be just gradually twisting it, very little, very little, very little. I'm trying not to go too far. But if I do, of course, I can heat it and bend it back. And you can do the same thing with the carbon fiber landing gear. You can do the same thing with actually any composite thing. Okay, now we've got it. Let's see if we can show it. We're right on. However, this is still hot. And what happens when it cools, sometimes it goes back a little bit, so I kind of babysit this a little bit. And monitor it. See, I have this little dead stop. The prop runs up against the dead stop, and now I want to see it perfectly flat with the bottom of my gauge. Now while this blade is cooling, and because it's an undercambered prop, it moved very quickly. The thicker the prop is, the more work it is to get that change. Always better to do it in 2 or 3 little steps than try to just go crazy and, well. And it's good if you have an old prop, if you can, especially a prop that you're not going to use anymore, if you can pick up one that somebody's crashed a plane or something, or chipped or something, one blade is bad, you can practice on it. Now Brian does it with the tailpipe of his car. And in the beginning I was thinking, well, that's hokey, but it works. All they're looking for is heat. You can actually do it if you have a brand new cup of coffee that didn't start to cool off yet. But the best, if you're doing it with boiling water, is to see the bubbles in the water. Now, if Rich Walbridge were here living next door and I could show him, what I would love to do is show him one and, of course, have him do the second one, but we'll have to settle for he's going to see it on a video. And Rich is pretty excited about building a Spitfire with us, a Seafire, whatever he's going to choose. We're going to be making a lot of parts from, which obviously I don't mind doing. I love the fact that he's got the passion. Because the reality in the world we live in now, so few people have real passion. Everybody wants to have something that really isn't hard to do. Okay, it looks like we're close on this one. Wow, we're right on the money, in fact. That's nice. Okay, so now we're up to this point. Now the next step, I'm letting it cool and then I'll recheck it. I don't want to cool it. I don't want to dip it in water. I want it to cool normally to room temperature, roughly 65 degrees here. And then what I want to do is I want to very, very carefully balance it, only taking material off the back. And sometimes Brian's props need a little extra balance, and sometimes they're real good. You never know. But that's just a characteristic of molding composite parts. And in fact, to be honest, some of mine need a lot of work too. Like I said, some are real close. This one's going to need a little bit of work. Always reverse it. Make sure that's the blade that you're going to want to take material off. In this case, yes it is. Take a little strip. I want to take it off the back, and I want to take it off the last maybe 2 or 3 inches if possible. Again, we've had some people in our club that have been, I won't mention any names, but they're not big on balancing props, and boy, when you launch their plane, another thing people think is that what happens is you balance a prop once and it's done. It's anything but that. It wouldn't be a bad idea every time you tighten a prop if you had the little hand balancer at the field. Now this one is, oh, there we go, real good. if it's both ways. Now, I also, at this point in time, I want to identify the prop, because I'm going to put this into my collection and I don't want to get it mixed up with other props for other planes or for other customers. So I'm going to just put a little notation on here. This will be RW1. I'll engrave it in on both sides. The other one will be RW2. Now I'll do the other one off camera, of course, but here's RW1. It's knurled, it's balanced, and it's pitched pretty much to the gauge that we know is a ballpark. Now, I'll do the other one off camera. I hope that's giving you some good information. We're, I'm guessing an hour, hour and a half a prop, maybe if I'm real fussy, but I'll do this one. But I've got one to start with. I could do the other one off camera. And Rich will have an RW1 and RW2. He'll have two little variations of a prop, and I hope when he gets his motor back, it'll be plug and play. Anyway, hope that information. Hey, I really hope the weather's nice tomorrow. We could test some of these out. That'll really make it worthwhile that we put the push on today. Now we're at midday and the leaves are just unbelievable today. We had a lot of rain this morning, but it's really gotten nice, except it's really breezy. I hope tomorrow's going to be better, of course. We're going to start with prop 1 if we get a flyable day. We have 2 to test. And that's Rich Walbridge's motor, pipe, everything ready to go. And I can always keep track of it by the identifying marks on the prop. That's what always lets me know which one is on the plane. And if the air is, well, if it's better than it is today, we may even get some patterns on video for Rich. I just hope the wind isn't blowing like it's blowing today. Oh man. We'll see tomorrow. Now as we wait to see if tomorrow is going to be a flyable day, and boy, again, that could change in a heartbeat. Some more pictures from Rich Walbridge. This just happens to be my absolute favorite, the 5-bladed prop. And if you go back to the Spitfire DVDs and you'll look at how much effort I put into getting one of these to work. And we actually flew at the 96 Nats with the Spitfire. We flew 5-bladed props on official flights. I guess basically just to prove you could do it, but nope. Talk about a labor of love, the 5-bladed rotol prop. I gotta tell you, Rich, these pictures are fabulous. I look forward to seeing them every day. You gotta send them every day here. Look at some of the spinner shapes, and of course that's one of the things we're working on, the parabolic spinner shape. These Griffin blisters up on this one. Oh man. So if you can't decide what color to paint your spinner, I guess no matter what color you paint it, it'll be fine. Look at the pitching these props too. We're just pitching props here. I don't think you heat those with a heat gun and repitch them now. Now that is a great picture. That is absolutely fabulous. And I know this is one Joe likes. There's the camera, the camera port. It's got the rudder shape that I personally like. The Malcolm hood, radiators wide open, maximum power, Griffin blisters, and look at that spinner shape. Now this is very ironic. I mean, I'm looking at this picture and up here it has the last. And I was thinking of one of the little detail touches I would put on my Spitfire, somewhere on a Spitfire in small letters would be the last Spitfire. And that's something. Yeah, and if you're thinking the best thing in the world is to watch Dancing with the Stars, Rich says his wife likes to watch it too. I got stuck watching it the other night. It was unbelievable. I can't believe it, but I watched it. The sacrifices I have to make to keep my 5-bladed props in order. He is a gate guardian. Now, you know what I would really love to have on the roof of my house? I'm sure Karen would not really think this is the coolest thing, but can you imagine having something like this on the roof of your house? And let the neighbors know that you were marching to a little bit different drummer. All right, there's the Rotol graphics. Now, here's one of the little jobs, you know, if somebody wants to do it, somebody in the audience, is scale down those Rotol graphics so we can put them on the props. Now this one is one I personally got to fondle when I was in Duxford. This one is based at Duxford, or was based at Duxford. Again, it's got the rudder that I like, the pointed rudder. Bubble canopy version. This one is in, it's actually right underneath the Vulcan in Duxford. That's really a nice paint job too. So, you know, I've been leaning toward trying to come up with something silver and red. That was one of my thoughts. And of course it can be a fantasy. It doesn't have to be an exact copy of this paint job or anyone. But that's one of the things I had thought about. The silver with the B25, the shading and inking, one of the thoughts. But again, that changes on a daily basis. In fact, it changes every time I get a bunch of these pictures. Anyway, from Rich Walbridge, and we really appreciate him taking the time to share these with us. And we got your props ready to test tomorrow. God, I hope it's a nice day. I don't know why. I'm all excited about getting to the flying field. I've been working on that rental property now for a couple of weeks, and I could really use a break. Could definitely use a break.
Now, we wake up this morning, we're hoping we're going to have a day to test props, but we get so much bird action, I'm getting diverted from my main objective. We had chickadees out there this morning. It's unusual that we have chickadees. And we had a blue jay and some grackles, so we've got a wild. As it gets colder and colder here, the food supply dries up, and then they depend more and more on my seed supply here. They're going at it this morning. What a great way to start off a day, huh, Karen?
Absolutely. Everybody's there.
The big grackaloni is back.
Starling.
We call him the grackaloni even though he's a starling. Now what's funny is when two of these come at the same time, two or three, they start fighting over the seeds and over the seed to feed block and everything. And then the action begins. Let the action begin. So instead of watching some crazy news program in the morning, finding out what the weather is if it's a flyable day, I depend on Rich and John for that. I'm watching my grackalonis here. And what's funny is you would think a bird that big, he would intimidate the other ones away. Not a bit, not a bit.
Well, it's a very early, very foggy morning, and I don't know if that means we're going to have some flying today, or the wild hogs are going to go work on Rich's Stuka, or what we're going to do. But we really would like to test those props today. Looks like it rained a little bit overnight too.
The chickadees are very entertaining. They're usually not here when the little brown birds are here in flocks. These little guys with the white face. And they like to hang upside down. Oh, there's two of them now. Out there now. No.
You know what I have downstairs that they were like?
Karen's been filling this thing up with potato chips. What do we have?
No.
Stale potato chips? What did we have the other day?
Corn chips and potato
Corn
chips.
chips. And they look,
Potato
she's hanging upside down now.
And Triscuits.
The little chickadee's hanging upside down now. Well, I hope we get a flying day out of this. I'm itching to get to the field. Oh, now we got two on one feeder here. Never get tired of looking at these birds in the morning. Always gets me started off to a very productive day. They are pretty. Little white face. White-faced chickadees. I'm surprised now they're out there with the brown birds. Usually when the brown birds come, they don't share the feeder.
But the brown birds don't bother them. The
No, they're
sparrows.
just, they're fraidy cats, that's all. They're right here in the tree, you can see too. We had a titmouse this morning. You can always tell them with their pointy head. And he always prefers, he waits till most of the birds leave, and then there he is, he just came by. Takes a seed and leaves. He never eats at the feeder. He'll take a seed and just fly away. Well, we've had enough action for one morning. It's time to get the props into the car, get the fog off the windshield, and see if we can get some flights today. Because after today, it's supposed to go back to being really cold. What a great way to start the day, especially if you're retired and you have a little extra time to have your extra coffee. What a great way to share it with your wife.
Boy, the early morning fog here. This reminds me of when we went to visit Elliot Scott in England. Wow, fog every morning. Still some beautiful leaves on the trees. We probably got another week. Ooh, a dumpster. That's what I need over at the other house. Not happening. The leaves in the street are telling you that it's fall. It's coming up on the end of fall. Look at the size of this pile of leaves. And usually when you have fog, it means you'll get at least a little bit of flying time before the air goes crazy. Now, every morning I wait for this light, and I notice they got another vet in stock. Karen must have ordered me a blue one for Christmas. Can you imagine? For all I know, that's an 08 or something. Everybody's got a vet except Wendy. Breaks your heart, doesn't it? Now this morning reminds me, there was a day that, I don't know, I'd love to see if I still have the video of Jose Modesto and I were out flying, practicing for one of the nets, and I had the A-26. And he put in a flight where I couldn't see the plane on the other side of the circle. But I don't know that we're going to see the plane on the other side of the circle. I don't even know if the hogs are going to be here. This may be a fog-hoggy day. But usually by now I can see the hogs. The river's flat as a pancake. Even if they're not here, I have the stooge. I'll get some flights. I want to see how these props are going to work. And yeah, I'm the only one here. Can you believe this? Well, it's still real early. The lights are still on the field. I didn't even know we had lights here. The water, yeah, it did rain last night. We had quite a bit of rain. Look at all that rain. Ooh. Well, I don't care. I'm going to take out the stooge. We have work to do. All right, it looks like we got the whole field to ourselves, as Karen would say. Now, the only issue we have here is obviously there's no air whatsoever for whacking some nice bottoms or whatever, but we can work on this engine run. And this is prop number 1. It's on Rich Walbridge's engine, which I've had about a little over 2 gallons of fuel through so far. A little over. I'm not sure how much. I gotta look at the notes. It's cold out here, so we'll get some prop info back from this, that's for sure. And we got 2 of them to test. I got my square 1 prop and Rich's number 2. We'll start with number 1, see what we can get off it. If we get some air, we can get some downwind video. I guess it doesn't even matter now. There's no sun, there's no wind, there's no air, no birds, no nothing. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable day. But anyway, we're looking forward just to seeing how this is going to all work out. Now, first run of the day, I would not want to, especially if I'm testing new props, I would not want to have a lean run for the first run of the day. So that is one deal breaker here. You do not want to have a lean run.
Pretty eerie, this first flight. It's really an eerie feeling flying here under these conditions. I'll let it cool off a little bit, stooge it up. I got a rich run on the motor now. It's looking pretty like we're real close. This is prop 1 and we're real close. If anything, it's got a little more pitch than this model needs in cold weather. Hey birds, get away. But that's why we made two. One with a little, the number 1 has a little more pitch, number 2 has a little less pitch. Just, I mean, a piece of paper. But usually, that little amount, now especially in cold weather, the air density, almost 100. Almost 100. That's like record air density here. So we'll give the engine a little while to cool off. And this engine, with probably by the time we're done with this session, will have coming up on 3 gallons of fuel on it. But it's a honey. This is a nice starting, nice, easy to needle setup. Now in this cool weather, the motor's cool right off. Really, you don't even have to allow time for it to cool off. I want to, if all else goes well, just sneak up on this needle valve setting little by little. This is one of my tests that the engine is really coming in nice. It's not a real scientific thing, but that when a motor's warm, boy, that's about as nice as it gets. And of course, I didn't plan it this way, but it's a giant advantage not to have you know, other people flying, because I can get back-to-back flights. I can get through my gallon of fuel in a relatively short time, get some tripod flights. If we get even a little bit of breeze, it's just totally dead right now. Great air, I guess, if you're a bird. Now this has turned out to be an unexpectedly productive day. Basically because we don't have to share the field. And that, I don't know where Rich and John are, but well, Brian I know is working. But we're getting a lot of flights back to back, and what's proven to be exactly true. This is the prop number 1 that has just a hair more pitch. And it's just a hair fast in cold weather. So what this would tell me is, in hot weather, if Rich were flying in 70 or 80 degree weather, this one will be perfect. I mean, it's like 45 or 50 now. I didn't look at the thermometer recently. But we're gonna have 2 of them, and before the day's over, we'll get the lower pitch one of the 2 on. And then we'll try to get some tripod flights, but there's no telling. The sun has been going in and out. We've even had a couple of drops of rain in the course of this day. And I don't know if the hogs are hogging it up or what's going on. But this is what I call the square one setup. 76 prop, 18 inches. Pretty much standard, a little bit deep pitched Brian Ether prop. This is an undercambered prop. I like the flat back ones a little better. But then again, that's according to the ship. This is a relatively light ship, relatively thin airfoil relative to the Testarossa. If this were on a Testarossa, this would be perfect because there'd be a little more drag. It'd just be a whole lot different. Very friendly motor to needle. Seems like hot, cold, it doesn't balk too much. I've been trying to do this, is start it without choking it, but that isn't, it really does need a choke. Needs one choke. Now, we learned a couple little things about the motor today that are significant. That the I always like to see some of them start just one backflip. This one seems to be a one choker almost all the time, hot or cold. Even cold, sometimes two chokes, but no more than that. It's a good match. It's a very close match to where we want it to be. I would say if the weather were a little warmer, it would dial right in. Now, prop number 2 is probably going to be a little soft based on the fact that this number 2 has a hair, maybe a thickness of an IBM card on a trailing edge, less pitch. And one of the things happened is we busted the cowl mount. This is, keep in mind, this plane was made in 98, 99. It's going to be 10 years old, and it's finally, and the fiberglass part isn't the part that's cracking, it's the mount that's made out of wood that basically is just cracked right through, and the bolt's going right through and out the other end. So I guess for the rest of the day we'll just fly it without the cowling. The only thing I could complain about today is that the air is still stone dead. And I wanted to get a couple of flights of stunt patterns, but I really don't need it, but it would be nice to have it if this plays out a little better. But we still have time, and what's nice is now that Karen's retired, we can vary our lunch hour, quite a bit. We usually have lunch at 1, but I can always, I don't have to even have lunch if it's a nice flying day, that's for sure. And plus, see, I earn carbon offsets. I watch Dancing with the Stars. So if I want to stay at the flying field and camp out here, I just pull the Dancing with Stars card. That was funny. In fact, Rich Walbridge told me his wife likes Dancing with the Stars. Dancing with the Twins. Wow. I'm amazed how many people put up with that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, Mike Rogers actually is a dancer. He goes to dancing classes and these tournaments and everything. And he gave up pattern masters for Dancing with the Stars. I don't know what's wrong with that picture. I don't know. I'm not so sure. Now, let's just for laughs see, because the motor should still be on. Let's see if this is a... I always try to come up with some tricky start procedure, but... Now the reason I'm putting it here is I want to hear the motor.
what I really hoped from that flight was I wanted to just listen to the motor run. And boy, Rich, it doesn't get any sweeter than this on the first day out. Believe me. That prop load, if we were in just a little bit warmer air, would be just perfect. Now, it's just a little on the fast side. One of the things I could do is just take the needle, back it out. Not sure. In fact, as I speak, the sun comes out. Look at this. God smiles upon us. But I really wanted to squeeze this day in because I have Joe coming down later this week. I have a lot of projects Karen's got me working on. We have the kids' closet. And the fact that I've been able to steal a whole day with no interruptions, just priceless. I'm going to get through and just basically get through the rest of this gallon of fuel. At that point in time, we're going to wind up with, this engine will have about 3 gallons on it. It's as standard as it gets. It's turnkey, off-the-shelf parts. There's no trickiness to it. There's no fanciness to it. Everything about it is something you can just buy, plug it in. I guess that's why they call it plug and play. Anyway, I've been giving it a couple minutes and having my coffee between rounds, I guess is the right word. I was trying to come up with a starting routine. It seems like the Testarossa motor is a 2-choke. It's always 2 chokes. And sometime it'll start on that one backflip. I don't know. It seems like it's a hit or miss. If you're at a contest, 1 choke and flip it. And I'm just trying to think of, we've still got the original glow plug in there. It hasn't shown me any reason to change the plug. It's been a lot of fun doing this. It's actually not been, of all the motors I've broken in for other people and worked on and tested and tweaked and basically done this. I mean, we did one for Gerald Champ earlier in the year. Bulletproof, but just turnkey. In fact, we did it in this plane with a header without a pipe. Now, this is a motor. You also have the choice if you ever wanted to run a Rich Oliver header on there or a Scott Dinger muffler or anything. This motor with that, it's got that nice 2.4 characteristic, and I think you can hear it. And when I go back and play this at the shop, I'll be interested to see if how much of this I can hear, and I'll try to get a couple more flights on. Basically, so you can hear the motor. Now, we're not trying to slam dunk bottoms here or work on intersections or anything. In fact, with the air dead like this, you're better off just being safe. But it's still something that for me, every time I can do this, I get more and more confident that you can take Rojet parts right off the shelf, put the right prop on, use the correct fuel, and on the first day out at the field, you can have what amounts to be very, very friendly, needle-friendly, easy to start stunt runs to die for. And if we could get, at some point in time, get the same thing with the 90, that we have a set of things that last year we had it pretty close, but I really want to push it even more. And one of the things I've been thinking about doing is just putting the Novanta motor into the Jose's test plane, so I can run some muffler tests and things without chewing up the Novanta anymore. As I say this, the birds are all coming in here now. I've got the bird parking lot. I didn't have enough birds. Anyway, this is what it's like flying East Coast stunt in the second half of November. And we're getting flights. And any day you get flights is better than watching Dancing with the Stars. Okay, it's time. I changed the prop. This is prop number 2. Number 1 has the little bit additional pitch. Number 2, a little bit less pitch. It will be interesting to see. Now this should slow it down, a tad. Give it a little less, a tiny bit less of load on a motor, which is not significant. And the thing I like about Rojets, now, everybody's got a personal taste in motors, whether they like this motor or that motor. But the thing I like about them is, and I've done this enough times that I feel confident in saying it, every one is the same as the one before. There's some level of consistency that, now, back in the old days of Tigers and Foxes, you got a good one, a bad one, a reworked one that was tight, one that was loose, one that was rusty. You never knew what the hell you had in the beginning. And each one was like a different stepchild. Each one needed a bail bond, one needed Dancing with Stars, and it was just unbelievable. The thing I like about these is all of the ones I've done, whether they're for customers or mine or the ones Rich Oliver sent me, the ones I've done for other people, that you can come out and this level of consistency, and you can get right down to flying in the first day. There's no big day of reckoning. You know what I ought to do with this? Just for Rich Walbridge's information, I don't usually tack the engine, but for right now, because it's a ballpark, and this is for prop 2, by the way, not prop 1. So let's see roughly where this has wound up. Okay, now the number 2 prop is a little softer, incrementally softer, a little bit slower in the maneuvers. It feels like I could even slow it up a little more, but I think both of these props will be ballpark enough that when Rich gets him back with his powertrain and his engine, if he could just take this right out, bolt it right in his new plane. And again, it's that road, the thing I like is the consistency. If we were doing Super Tiger 60s now, everyone would be totally different. Now the only difference I found is the ones that Big Jim did. Big Jim made them, whatever he did, he made them consistent. But if you took stock ones out of the box and started, one ran away, one was slow, one was fast. Jimmy Casale used to have a box of engines in his car, and he'd just be and finally he'd find one that matched that plane. But it was just a nightmare doing it. That's what makes this part of the sport, to me, very enjoyable, is we don't have to go through that anymore. With the consistency, first off, the Brian Ether props are great. Doran's props, same thing. When you pitch them, you don't have to go back 40 or 50 times to do it. These two, actually, we could go right out if there was a contest this weekend and fly them. Or if Rich Walbridge would jump on a plane, we could just put the handle in his hand and introduce him to the world of cold flying. Anyway, it's good to be flying a Spitfire too, because it's kind of reminded me how much I like the Spitfire. This is, I guess there's just something about it. When you're at the handle, there's a profile of a Spitfire. There's something about it that I like. And it doesn't matter which of the Spitfires it is or the Seafire, it's got a look that I like. And I can't imagine that the new one with the big spinner and the dihedral and whatever paint job we can come up with, I know it's going to be exciting to me anyway. Now we launched that time just under 8,400, which is 83.5, 84, not a big deal. These engines have a wide enough range. They're not narrowed down to when you're up in the real high RPM and you're off a tad and the prop doesn't have a lot of pitch. It's very, very touchy, and it's fine if you're one of the guys that can stay on top of that. And a good analogy is if you have a real high performance car, you got a Dodge Hemi and you can change the plugs every time you drive it, things like that. That's good. But the consistency here is one of the things that I think helps average people enjoy the sport. And actually it allows them to get to be better flyers, because every flight is not an adventure. You just get more flights per whatever. I don't know. Whatever. Per gallon here. We're getting on with this gallon. Sure. Now normally on a test session like this, I run until the fuel jug goes empty, and then I decide, should I stay or not? Because to come out here and do testing, you really need a gallon of fuel. And that would give us about 3 gallons in this engine. At which point in time, I'd be real confident that, especially the runs that we're getting today, I would say they would be good anywhere. They would be good in Montana. The only thing better than this would be if they cancel Dancing with the Stars. I know that ain't happening. This is one of the secrets. You know, for people that live in California, maybe they don't know this secret. This is the secret. Hot coffee. See that steam coming out of there? Hot. And what happens with hot coffee? It lets you get, it lets old men like me get through a longer day. Now we still have about I'm guessing a quarter of that gallon to go, and we're just gonna take a break because I'm getting exhausted out here. I'm not in my summer state of exercise, and what happens is, because I'm walking with Karen every day for an hour, I'm bleeding off a lot of my speed there. But this is the secret. This is the secret to life. Hot Javalia coffee. Now, as this day is going on and on and on, we're here about 3 hours now. That sun is going behind the clouds, out of the clouds, and it's very, very unpredictable. The air is moving around now, but I still would like to get. And again, I always think it's a good session when I can burn a gallon of fuel. And what I try to do is, I have a little formula in my mind that every time I burn a gallon of fuel, I'd like to learn at least one thing that I can put in a bank. Now in this case, it's only confirmed what I suspected all along. Rich Oliver had good luck with these props. We've had good luck with Doran's props, among others, but this is the nice thing now that we're going to be able to do. When Rich Walbridge gets this engine back, and this powertrain, this should be plug and play. But if he has an issue with it, if he says, geez, it's going too fast, it's going too slow, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, I'll be able to, especially if he can get me some video. Now, I have video of him flying at Whittier Narrows, and I can look at that and I can critique the engine run. See, and if you're doing things where you want to critique the engine run, the best thing is to stand in a position where you can hear the motor run, not hear people talking about Dancing with the Stars and, oh yeah, this guy's got a fat gut or something. Try to get where you can hear and listen, turn the sound way up on a TV and hear that stunt sound that I don't know what you would call it, 2/4 brake, stunt run, whatever. But when you know you've got the stunt run, the rest of it is going to be easy. The rest of it is going to be a piece of cake. Now again, we were hoping that we would come up with some brilliant one-flip start thing. Maybe flipping this over a few times. And boy, this is a nice, Rich, this is a nice tight engine, believe me. Let's just see. Nope. Now I missed it, see? Oh, those geese are coming back here. I gotta watch for those geese. Well, you probably can see the sky is really getting cloudy now. It went up to about 55 degrees, but they said it might get higher. Not on my thermometer, it's not. We have really stolen a day, and it's been a good day. This is a day that, for all purposes, we wouldn't have had if we had a normal winter. But thanks to Al Gore and global warming, last year we had the ARF. We did all the work on the ARF and some of the work with the 90. But this year, getting some of these things fine-tuned, and it's the same thing. Every time we burn a gallon of fuel, I like to think or hope or know that I've learned something or reinforced some of the knowledge that I already have. And that's what motivates me. And plus, I like to get the exercise. But unfortunately, here's the problem. As soon as I get home from here and we have lunch, we're going out to walk on the track. And that'll be another hour of, you know, and for a 62-year-old geezer, I'm trying to keep the pace up. And then tonight to run over to the rental property and do some more cleanup. It just never ends. Just never ends. Never ends. But if it was easy, everybody'd be taking a rocket to the moon. Now this in itself is an unusual thing, that air density has stayed around 97. It's been almost 100. That air density staying that way for a whole day. What that does, it always gives you supercharged power. Now, and I would guarantee that in Houston you don't get many days that gauge is pushing 100. But we don't get a lot of where it's pushing 84 or 85. But that's what leads me to believe this prop, this is the number 2 prop by the way, this prop will, the softer of the two, is probably going to be soft in California, and the number 1 prop is going to be just right. So anyway, but that's all, and it's all relative to the drag of the model and how it's needled and a million other things. But I think just the fact we've been able to get this right on the first day is a major step forward. And the fact that we could just do it over and over and over and over is really nice. Now, I spoke to Dave Midgley last night. Dave assured me he could still make some canopies if we need a new mold, or if we're going to need some replications of these canopies. So I'm hoping the next couple of weeks anyway, we don't need him right away, Dave will come through with the canopies. He always does. It's difficult at his job because it's such an ongoing, growing business. I know he just can't shut the vacuum machine down to make 5 canopies. But we'll be, for sure, we'll be looking forward to getting them. And if we can't use them, in other words, if we can't, we can always maybe improvise these. I don't know. I don't know that I want to do that though. And I certainly, if it's not going to be perfect, we'll just make a new mold up. And I think it's safe to say we're coming up on the end of this gallon of fuel. And in I think it's a little over 4 hours, we've basically got a lot done here. Again, I would have only gotten a third of the amount done had we shared the field. But it's okay. There's days we give Buddy Weeder the field, there's days we steal it, there's days we share it. We have time for both. But when you want to do this kind of tuning, and especially if you want to do it and be very accurate in the results, hey, I'm real happy. We probably have a little over 2 hours into these props, and it's real nice to know that you can just come out to the field. That's what makes that gauge I have priceless. If you didn't have the gauge, we would have come out here with the stock pitch. They would have been screaming memes. They'd be going way too fast. Because these engines are powerful, and you just give them a little bit more pitch than they need, and they go for a rocket ride. There's no doubt about it. That's one of the things that you have to have with any modern engine, especially if you're going to run a pipe. You've got to have some kind of a pitch gauge to get it in the gear it wants to be in, and just guessing at it. And anytime you want to prove that for yourself, just take a 6-pitch prop from a Tiger 60 and put it on any modern motor and see what happens. You better hold on. That's what I like this thing. Anyway. And it seems like we're getting more and more comfortable with this start routine. Now, the only thing bad about the day is it's time for lunch, and I'm sure Karen is going to push me to my limit. Ugh. Now that I'm good and exhausted. 4 hours of flying with a stooge. I can do that again. And we got a little less. I'm saying we're at 2 3/4 gallons right now. I guess we'll find out. When this gallon is empty, we'll know for sure. An excellent day. The only downside of the whole day was breaking that cowl mount. I can't believe I did that, but hey, on a 9-year-old model, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, that's for sure. Well, that is the 3rd gallon of Rich Walbridge's fuel. Rich, you're not getting that good of mileage. You gotta get on the plane and come over here and fly this puppy. Actually, we had a really good day. Air density stayed good all day. We got our props tested just like we wanted to. Burned up the fuel we wanted to. A spectacular day. And it's got me psyched even more, as if that was possible for Spitfires. But it's time to get on the track with Karen. Okay, one of the next things we can do on this project, I can get at least the time that Karen's watching this Dancing with the Stars up there. Maybe I can get the inboard tip hollowed out. That'll get me one step ahead here. Now Joe did a nice job of carving this, of course, but what I want to do is using a pen, I want to allow a little more than 1/8 of an inch. Now one of the things about elliptical wings that's unique to elliptical wings is how twist resistant they are, because they're basically curved entities. Where a nobler wing or a cardinal wing, very prone to twisting. Less prone if they're geodetic, but in the case of a, there we go. In the case of any elliptical wing, very rigid because of all the twists involved. Okay, now I can split these apart and these will be ready to just hollow out. Now from this, what I want to do is I want to take a brand new blade and split this. I'm trying to see, but he's done such a nice job, you almost can't see the parting line. And then what I want to do is I want to lay out, physically lay out where our lead outs are going to adjust, because that's going to determine how far out, and I'm assuming I can get it out to about here. But again, once I hollow this out, it'll be a lot more obvious what the answer has to be. And sometimes it's a simple thing to just run a razor in there. I don't know how much glue Joe used on this. Apparently he used more glue than I do. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to trace out. Basically, I'd like to have about 1/4 of an inch on a trailing edge that I don't touch. Maybe 1/4 of an inch here because we're going to taper it. Maybe 1/4 of an inch around the whole perimeter here, roughly. And now we want to really carefully hollow these out until we have basically 2 clamshells. Now the gouge is probably the best thing I can use to just rough this out, but I want to put my hand on the other side so I can feel where it's, I can just estimate, because it's a curved surface, where it's going to get too thin. It looks like this is a relatively nice piece of wood. Every once in a while when you're carving something like this and you hit a hard spot, this looks like it's going to be fine. I was so glad we got that really nice day for prop testing that we had, boy, despite the fog. Now I can see where I'm coming up on this, and I want to go ever so slowly. I don't want to make it too thin. Dancing with the wingtips. Anyway, once I get half of one done, we can go over to the sanding bench and just get the last little bit out with some sanding blocks. The trick is now just not to get carried away and make it too thin. In fact, if anything, just leave a little extra on. Now the idea is to try to get all the scratches going in the opposite direction. So let me just show this. I had all the carving marks going in this direction. Now I've got the ball end router. And now I'm putting all the scratches in this direction. So what I'm doing, I'm constantly cutting the mountaintops down. And then I can feel this and feel, yeah, I still have a couple of hard spots here, thick spots. Now I'll put all the cuts on a 45-degree angle, then put them on a 45-degree the other way, and then look to see how I'm doing. If I do this in steps, it goes a lot quicker than just trying to do it in one dimension. I can go in 45 this way. Now I can just reverse it, put the cuts the other way. Now I can still see I'm thick, relatively thick here. I can feel it with my hand. A little bit thicker than I want to be right here. Now let me get the phone. So again, here's half. And because this is going to be the top half, I'm going to try to leave the bottom just a little bit thicker because I'd like to have the lead outs come out just below the parting, what I'll call the parting line. So I want to leave a little extra material there if I can do that, what Joe calls that windy thing, bringing it to a razor edge. I know Joe likes that. And so what we need to do, if that's the case, is we need to leave a little extra material down here when we do the bottom. In fact, I ought to, for right now, just not even hollow that last little bit until I know exactly where that guide, I'm thinking the guide is going to go right in here, give us the lead out adjustment, and this'll eventually, well, the top is going to get, I'm assuming, a piece of 64th plywood, and the lead out is going to, there'll be a little kerf in here, but again, until I shape it, I'm not going to know. But the next step is, and that's a good trick, by the way, put all the cutting lines one way, the other way, this way, that way, and you wind up with
that it's relatively easy now to just by hand sand this nice and smooth and make what amounts to be a little clamshell out of it. Now, one of the things I found useful, again, that tool I made to do the Novanta side scoops, again, it's got a little bit of a curve in it. I can wrap the sandpaper, the sticky back Bernie Trent paper right around it. And it's a pretty good tool for getting in here and getting out the last of the sanding scratches. I want to leave enough material that we can get the last hinge in out at the tip. Now I need to explain one of the things I had thought about that we might be able to do, and I was wrong, is put little plug-in lead outs here similar to what we have on some of the ships, and not the Spitfires. They've always had sliders. But what happens with plug-in lead outs when they go around a corner like this, when they go around a curved edge, they get really awkward looking and they stick out. And one of the things we want to hopefully include in on this design is a real slick looking wingtip. Now, to do that, what I'm going to try to do is get most of the opening in the bottom piece and almost nothing in the top piece. But again, once this is finally hollowed out, I'll know more and I can see it in real life. So one of the things I'm always liking to do more is see things in real life, not just look at them and not understand them. The next step, of course, on this is, and I'll leave extra material here, is do the same thing. I'll do it off camera, hollow this piece out. So in the end, we're going to have two basic clamshells. Now with both of these pieces hollowed out, let's see what this looks like, because I need to make a pattern now. For that, first I need to develop exactly where that's going to go in a wing, and I need to make a pattern as the next step. So let me just get some idea of what this part is going to look like. This is the inside. We got plenty of pattern wood here to play with. This is going to be the inside. If I can get a half, let's see how this is going to work. And see if this is going to work the way I think it is. Now as this tapers down, what's going to happen is this is going to get smaller and smaller. Let's just see if I can do it this way. Now I can go back and forth. It's going to need some fine tuning and some sanding, but if I can develop half of it, then I can just flip it and make the full-size part. Now I can see basically where the high spot is here. And then I'm only trying to develop, and if I can trim that down, I'll have a pretty good idea what half of this lead-out guide is going to look like. Now the next step is to develop a full-size pattern, just to see if this is going to work for us. This is just a piece of scrap balsa wood, but if this is close, it'll be a lot easier to develop it with scrap balsa than it will with, and I'll have to cut it out of plywood then. That's going to be the area that's available to us. Right, pretty close to that amount. So I'll cut this out of balsa, see if the pattern's close. If it is, then I can work on that lead-out guide shape. Now just to get a rough idea, if we're close, I can pin this in place. Take an ordinary ruler and just see if we're on center. And see, I'm not on center exactly. I got to move that part actually a little bit forward, because I got a reference off that. Because if the center line is wrong, this part is going to be wrong. And I want to get it 90 degrees to the edge. I see I'm still not right. What are you doing, Wendy, here? I see, I got to put a little dent in that balsa wood up there, that's all. Now when I make the real part out of plywood, of course, I want to have hopefully an accurate pattern. It's a lot easier to shape this part than to be shaping plywood and etc., etc. Oh, let's see if we got it. One step ahead, I want to see if it's parallel to my center line. Okay, that's nice. Now I can see I'm not exactly height-wise, but it won't matter. As long as I'm on center, I can fill some of that up with a piece of scrap if it's small. But what it's telling me is I ought to leave the line on. I ought to make this part up. Oh, I had it crooked anyway. Look at this. Unbelievable. Let's see if it's better when I get it 90 degrees. But in any case, I'd leave the line on and then work on this until I get a nice tight fit. It's going to be close. A little bit bigger in the front when I make the part. Now the next thing I want to do is lay out my 1/8 inch slot. It's an 1/8 of an inch of slot that I need because a 440 bolt is going to adjust this. So I need to leave at least an 1/8 of an inch slot. I need to plot that, but I'm going to plot it below the center line. There's no reasonable way you can make this come to a point and the lead outs come out right at the point. So what I'm opting for is to have them come out just below the center by the minimum amount, so that the top edge, from the top view, we see a perfect elliptical wing. Now I've laid that out. Now from this point I can just take a razor, cut that slot out nice and straight. That'll be my slider. Now whenever you're making this type of a part, always best to put the slot or the hole or whatever in first and then jigsaw out the outer edge. When you have the part, it's smaller, it's harder to get that slot in nice. Okay, so that's what we really have to do here. And I'm hoping this is going to work out. I'll save this as my pattern part. This is my real part. Now I need to make up the little lead out and blind nut, little assemblies that are going to compromise, that's going to become our adjustable lead out slider. Now the next thing I can do here is make up, and what I need to figure out here, I don't want this to be any bigger as it gets into the edge. Yeah, that'll be fine. So I need it to be no bigger than this when I cut the plywood. The biggest size this can be, and this is just a rough size. I can double that, and that'll be the size I'm going to need. I can drill the holes, put the blind nuts in. Now I laid out some extra ones because while I'm making these I can make the ones for the other wing at the same time while I'm doing all this drilling and filing and everything. I want to get these ready, but this is probably going to be the last part we're going to get done tonight because we're coming up on the end of this session. I'm going to get all these rough edges off. And we'll be ready to put the blind nuts and the little brass inserts in there. I want to be sure all of the blind nuts that I'm using, before I glue them in.
Wendy?
Is it supper time yet?
Got a big package here.
A big package, lucky me. Always a little bit of any kind of oil. And now those blind nuts are ready to install. Well, it'll only be a little while to finish this up tomorrow. I got to get the eyelets in there. I got to make up some washers, among other things. But Karen's ready for showing me her new, well, let me share it with you.
Oh, my brother's coming up from Florida.
Jay's coming from Florida, so we got to give him a the royal treatment.
A pre-Thanksgiving dinner.
Oop, as he walks into the cabinet. Oh, that looks nice. Now this is not the holiday setting.
No, the holiday setting is at Stacy's house.
Did you enjoy Dancing with the Stars today?
Oh, well,
I'm so sorry I missed it, honey.
I know you are.
I'm heartbroken. Who got thrown off? Donnie and Marie, or whatever her name is?
No,
She made it?
Cameron and Editor.
Oh, Wendy and Mike Rogers got thrown off. Can you believe this? Hey, that looks pretty nice.
What a dance trio.
So Jay's coming up Saturday, huh?
Yes.
All right. Well, it's been a long day. We'll see what the birds have to say over breakfast. That looks nice. Now, since my lovely bride has been retired, one of her goals is to organize her closets. How many more closets do you have to go?
I have 2 more.
So for all of the wives out there that would love to have organized closets, that's a Mike Kajeski closet, and she's even got her other closet with all our wine bottles. Too bad we don't drink. All her cookbooks. I mean, why can't my shop be like this? You know what? When you're done with all this, you could come organize my shop. I don't think so. Notice that? I'll tell you what, do that and I'll watch some Dancing with Stars with you. I'll hold your hand while Donnie and Marie get thrown off. How old is he there? This is Karen's brother when he was probably a pimple-faced kid.
Maybe 12?
12? How old is he now? 105?
He is.
How old is he?
57.
Oh, so we're going to put that right at his place setting when he's up here. Poor Jay. Where are you going to sit him? Poor Jay. The Scam of the Month Club. Unbelievable. Closets look great. When are you going to... You sure you're not going to... So we end this session knowing that we have a nice table setting for Jay, which I'm sure Karen's happy with. And the really good news is there are no more Dancing with Stars episodes on tape that I have to watch, so I can watch real TV tonight. Maybe I can get the Speed Channel or something. The Red Bull Racing or something educational. Oh. Boy, we were really, really lucky to get that prop testing day in when we had the chance, because they're predicting 3 days of rain and getting colder by the day. Oh, just what I need. You realize she's still got a tomato out here. I just noticed. There's one tomato left on what was a vine. Now, it's a better day for building than for flying. Funny how the rain never seems to dampen the enthusiasm of the birds. Boy, they're all out here this morning. Anyway, I left that lead out guide right in the middle. I need to finish that up today if possible. And I see the little red light on the coffee's on. It's ready. It's coffee time. Amazing, on these cold, clammy, rainy days, that cup of coffee tastes a whole lot different than when it's 80 degrees outside. But working in the shop in this weather, feel warm and cozy. Look at those leaves outside. Oh, we're gonna have the big rake up. The big rake up this weekend. I can see it coming. But in the meantime, today it looks like I'll get a couple hours of shop time here before we have to. I have to go get a haircut this afternoon. Oh, these little guys! I love these guys. Unbelievable. And a little inspiration this morning about my upcoming lead out guide. Now I'm always looking at the lead outs where they all wound up on the other spits. I know we're going to have enough travel, but I just want to make sure. Now whenever I leave a project from the day before, I try to leave it organized in such a way so I know where I'm going to pick this up from. Next thing is I got to get the blind nuts permanently installed and the little brass eyelets that are going to be the lead out bushings. Now I have the little brass bushing in one side. Now, because this is going to be just a little bit off center, I want to allow that the screws always go in the middle, because we can't get the lead outs one on top of the other, and that gives us the maximum travel and still allows each lead out to move individually. When I'm all done, I'll trim this screw, leave about 1/8 of an inch, and then pinch the back so that there's no way, if this screw gets loose, the screw can actually come out. I'll pinch it at the back. And I've already had one come out at a very inconvenient time, so I know. And trying to get that back in through a wingtip, good luck, Charlie. Now what I always do is put multiple washers here. It's like a little wedding cake. Because what happens if this washer is too small in diameter, what happens, it just spreads the tip and that breaks and falls in. We don't want that to happen. Now the only thing left to do is trim off the screws. And then I want to be able to take them out before I put that little notch on that little pinch on the end of it. What I'm really concerned with is that I can get the lead out all the way to the end, and I can get them close enough in the middle. If you put the screws on the outside, you lose that much of adjustment. Now before I actually start to lay out the installation, I want the side where the little sliders are going to reside to be 64th plywood, not light ply. So I laminated on a piece. This is just to give this a nice hard edge, again, because we want to squeeze this, but the thing I've seen is people over tighten these things to the point it's ridiculous and then crush the plywood or break it or spread it. So this gives us a little insurance that it's going to be just a little sturdier, and again, what we're looking for is that infinite lifetime, that time that it can last forever. Again, always keep in mind, always drill and cut the slot before you cut the big part. If you were to cut this first, it's harder to cut the slot. This gives you a little bit of handle while you're cutting that. Sometimes it's the simplest little things that you can pick up off a video, like if you were making this part and trying to cut the two pieces and then glue them together, easier to laminate it on and then trim it. Now this is going to be the tricky part, is to lay this out in exactly the position I want and just tack glue it in. I don't want a permanent joint. And what I've done in the past, when I've tried to glue a part in and I've had my adjustable parts in, I wound up gluing them that you couldn't, and then I have to cut it all apart. We want to get this piece installed and then at the last minute put the slider parts in, that's for sure. And that little piece of 64th plywood, that'll give us just a little bit of a, I hope, a durability factor. Because remember, Joe and I fly these planes get flown. These are not hangar queens or show planes or whatever, like Barrett Jackson cars that never get driven. These are going to get used. These are going to be some mileage on these. Hopefully a lot of mileage next year. What I tried to do is make sure this is parallel before I tack it in, and it's still subject to being moved a little bit. I put a little dot there because what I want to do is I want to lay this out and make sure my center line, it looks like I'm close, but it could go down just a little bit in the back before I tack this in. And the first step on this is going to be just to tack this in and put the other piece on top and see if we've got a pretty close fit. Now a little piece like this, just a thought, you look at something like this and you think, well, yeah, on a straight wing plane this is a relatively easy part. On an elliptical plane, where this is offset and where you've got a lot of other things all happening at the same time, this is going to be probably a whole session devoted just to working on this part of the wingtip. Now with that piece just tacked in there, now I can kind of look down and see if I'm right on center. That should be pretty close to exactly what I want. Now I also have to ensure not only that this piece is parallel to a rib, because otherwise our little eyelets are going to be cocked and there's going to be interference there, but I also want to make sure that it's parallel this way, straight up and down, otherwise the lead outs are going to bind one way or the other. So quite a bit of, that's why I've tacked this in, just with a tiny amount of CA, until I have all the alignments, and then I'll put a real glue seam there. Alright, it looks like I'm pretty close now, so what I want to do now, because I don't want this moving around, I want to have one half of it glued in. From this point on, I don't want this part moving. And again, if you were doing this and these little parts are in place, I wonder how many people have glued that together, including me. Now the next thing I just need to do is just a dry fit to see that my top clamshell is going to fit on. Just let this kick off normally. We're ready to start fitting that top clamshell. So I've got a close enough fit that I don't need to have it to be like a rib, I just need to be able to support it somewhat in the front, and that's going to be way close enough. But now I need to cut is the trough for the lead outs to go through, and my objective here would be to keep this piece solid, in fact line it with 64th plywood eventually, but have the lead outs come out just below center. Now that looks like the range. We only need to go to the first line because you're obviously not going to go squashing this for that last 1/8 of an inch. Then that'll give us a real good, plenty of room for adjustment. I went up, and what I did, I checked all the Spitfires. None of them fall outside this range after they're trimmed out. No, I just cut a rough trough in here. Again, it's got to be on a positive side by about a 64th of an inch so I can line it with plywood, if this works out the way I want. But I still have to be able to get in there with a 440, a wrench, to do the adjustment. So again, this is a part that I'm just totally willing to take a little extra time on, because the lead outs that stick out here are going to rub here. There's no doubt about that, and I want them to rub on 64th plywood if possible. Let's see now, if I look down there, see, they're gonna set out there just the way I want, hopefully. Now the second one, I'm not going to do the second one, because what I wanted to do is get one wing prepped up that Joe could do, like the gear blocks and things that we have to make a decision on the day that he comes here for the day. And I was hoping I'd get to that point in the next couple of days. But now from looking at the edge, I can see once the clamshell is on, that's probably going to be just about as good as it gets. Now this is going to get to be a tricky fit, because here's the dimension that I need, and I want to line, of course, both sides with plywood. This is 64th plywood. And I know this is coming out straight here, straight there. So what I need to do is backtrack a little bit. Just make some kind of a little pattern here, interpolate it. Okay, now we got a nice piece of 64th plywood that when and if these lead outs rub on anything, they'll be rubbing on 64th plywood instead of balsa. What that allows us now is the luxury of putting a hard CA edge on here. We can look right down into where that's going to go, because we're going to be doing a final shaping on the tip, but this will just give us a little bit of heads up on it. And again, because this is asymmetrical, it's really difficult to, every pattern has to be made individually, unless there's some tricky way that I don't know about, and there probably is. Now when I do the clamshells, what I have to do is I have to interpolate now and get the same part. I need to go basically from here to here with 64th plywood. And I'll just reverse that, make the reverse pattern, and put that piece up and top. You can see how much thinner this piece has thinned way out. This piece still has a lot of meat on it. And when it's all together, then we'll get it tack glued together and get that exact nice, I know what Joe calls windyizing, that razor edge. Now I just tack glued this onto the fattest part out at the tip. Here's the reason. I want to be sure I have enough room to get in there with a 440 wrench. And that looks like I've just hit it right on the money. Now I can glue this in permanently, and then we'll be almost ready to join the parts together. Boy, this is going to eat up a whole day. Now as I assemble this, I want to make sure that the only part I'm going to have to do is put a little thick CA up here. I'm not going to have to, I don't want any thin CA around these things, or these things will just for sure get glued up. Now while I'm gluing this together, I want this to be right in the middle on the highest spot. Now also I want to make sure, of course, that I have the full travel, the full adjustment, and I want to be sure that at no point in time am I taking these and over tightening them to the point where I'm crushing and breaking up the wood. Just basically hand tight. This is not holding the motor in. Now with this tacked together, it doesn't have a permanent glue seam because I may still have to pull this apart. You can see I want to blend this side down, blend this side up, but I want to start with this. It starts here and it tapers, gets to a taper, and it goes back out to our flap dimension. So this is going to be, well, the first thing I want to do is get the edge right. I purposely left the 64th plywood sticking out just a little bit, because that's going to be our, what I should say is a razor edge. And we're going to blend everything into that edge as the shaping comes about. But in the end, it's got to come back to its leading edge, this thickness, and it's got to end here. It can't be a razor blade around the whole edge. And this is one thing I'm not going to take and try to do this in a half an hour. I want this to be a real nice edge, because you can see up here I've already hardened this side with thin CA. Once I get the blend that I want that right on a razor edge when I'm done. And this would be very difficult to do with the lead outs in position. Let me get the phone. Now as I'm getting down to that plywood razor edge, I don't want to make the plywood razor edge disappear either. So what I'm doing each time through, just taking the slightest amount of thin CA to the edge, so I can keep that edge hard. Change this shape, and I can't change that, but I can bring this all, and this is going to be time consuming, I can see that. This is one of the jobs that we want to get really accurate, because what I want is from the top view. I don't want to see, well, I'm not going to even see it from the bottom. I want to see the perfect lead out exit when I'm done with this. Every single thing that involves dihedral just really makes the thing complicated, but certainly not impossible, and we're learning all the do's and don'ts as we go along here, I think. But this I can see for sure is going to be time consuming. This is going to be something that's just going to take a lot more time than I originally thought. And each time I get the edge back, I don't want to lose that edge because I'm sanding it like a razor blade. Or as Joe so fondly says, windy-eyes it. Not sure if that's a compliment or other. again, I want to do most of the shaping because what's going to happen, once the lead outs are here, this is going to be very difficult to get this perfect blend. It's a ton easier to do while this is outed just like this. This just makes it a whole lot easier. Now whenever you're looking to shape these razor kind of edges, what happens if we didn't have the plywood here? As soon as you went like that, you'd have a problem. You wipe the plane off, catch a fingernail, the plywood makes that razor edge possible, and I really don't want to get it any thinner than that. We're really pushing it as it is. Now all of the edges that are going to come pretty much to almost a point, and I have to blend this in yet, so I'm really only concerned with around here. What I've been doing, taking a little sanding block, and it's not real critical, but I'd get that edge exactly where I want it in soft balsa, and then harden it with thin CA. It just adds a little bit of durability to it also. And without that durability, those edges are vulnerable. And we can sand, of course, if you want to change that edge, you basically can just sand it right off. But that's the trick of tricks. That's the one that, when you want to have those nice thin edges, and I know Joe for one appreciates, it takes a little extra effort, believe me. A little extra work with the sanding block. But when we're done, and I think the last thing we're going to be able to do today is just pretty much get this tip installed. See how the blend comes out on the tip. I think we've accomplished, and it's taken a long time. It's taken longer than I really thought it would to get this just to taper right down. And I think if we make it any thinner than that, it's going to be a problem because it's an asymmetrical. We're coming down below the top profile, so we really can't get too cute here. And I've had several planes where the lead outs do reside, cardinals for instance, where they reside in the wing, and they, as long as they're not rubbing on a 30-degree angle here, it never seems to be a problem. There's no interference or anything that causes a bind in the controls. But the more of this I can get done before I put those lead outs right in the middle here, just going to make it a lot easier for me in the final analysis, that's for sure. This is one of the steps that very few people, I'm sure, will appreciate how much time goes into making all the patterns, all the parts that go into having this, and hopefully that we've got it right as I'm looking at it, that the lead outs will be coming out, and we'll have plenty of adjustment. We're way over the amount of adjustment I have on the other planes. And the last step is just to see, I've got the lead outs through there, and see that we have not distorted the shape at all. This will be ready to, first step of course, pin it in place and tack glue it to make sure everything lines up, because I don't want to get this on and it's like this or something. I want to tack it first. Once I'm happy with it, a permanent glue seam. Now from time to time what will happen is this shape will change from this shape. From gluing it together, when you do thin clamshells they get thinner. So what happens, you can just put a little spreader bar in here, don't even glue it in, to get it to be the right height. Now we don't need it because this one matches right up. But if we did need it, put that little spreader bar in there, and then just reach in with a little hook or a pin, or in this case it's an open bay wing. You just reach in and knock it out when you're done, and that seam would be final then. But the first thing is just to tack it in place. Look at this handsome dude launching Jacobone's plane here as I take a break. Look at this handsome guy, Joe Adamusco. It just turned out to be a little bit easier to do this with tape. The pins, because we have a plywood rib in there, they weren't really biting the way I wanted to, but the tape worked perfect. I'm ready to take the tape off and put a permanent glue seam on there. I want to make sure that's straight. I want to eyeball it up.
Once I'm convinced it's straight, it's right on center at top, right on center at the back. Okay, now the first edge I want to true up, there's always a little bit of extra material. You want to get the hinge line perfectly straight. Now what I want to do also in the front, I want to make sure we don't have a high or a low spot there. Now I want to maintain this radius that Joe has created here, but now from this point on I want it to do a final taper. And then the last thing is to get a little sanding block and get this joint trued up. And this is the part that takes seemingly forever, because I want to lay this block right up on there. I want to see, I just want to pick up high spots. And I know from past experience that this is not a 5-minute job. This is something that's, to get it to really blend in perfectly and then get a permanent glue seam on it, it's going to take time. And I have to look at it from the front, from the sides. So I want to carry that leading edge radius that Joe has developed as far down on the tip as I can. Keep that trailing edge true. And little by little, it takes time. Little by little, that seam starts to go away. But it's, if I do it with a block, I'm not going to wind up with a, where it's got a warp or a twist or something in it. Now every time I get to the point where I close my eyes and I cannot feel that joint, I think I feel it just the slightest little bit there. If you force yourself to use a block, there's almost no chance you'll wind up, when you're doing a substrate, that you have a giant ripple or dimple, unless the balsa wood, of course, starts to shrink. Whoa. Busy day at Black Rock. Now, that phone call was Joe Adamusco. Tomorrow's the day. Breakfast with Wendy. Breakfast at Tiffany's. Anyway, I wanted to get any little spot that looks, and it was a spot. I do it by feel, not by look. Again, the big block allows the curves, that we don't have a curve. We want to try to get all, and this, it may look real easy when it's done. When you look at an elliptical wing, it may look like, oh boy, piece of cake, we could do that in our sleep. Well, there's an awful lot of detailing, but boy, when you're done, for people that enjoy or appreciate elliptical wing planes, of which there are plenty, Thunderbirds, Smoothies, Spitfires, there's probably others that I'm leaving out. Now, once I get that joint that I'm happy with it, every time through, in fact, let me get a, looks like we're running out of glue here, baby. I don't know if we're okay. We're good to go. But that seam, if you just run that seam every time, because if you break through in a spot, it's a problem. Don't let the paper stay there. I could take the smaller block and just let the dust fill in any gaps there are. So I'll try to get this part done tonight so that we can have a good day with Joe tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to seeing him. Catching up on Spitfire technology. And the biggest thing of all, see now, the problem is once you put any dope at all in a wing, it re-shrinks it and you have to go back and do the same steps over and over again. But you want to start, at least I do, I want to start with something that's relatively straight anyway.
And boy, the controls on this wing are absolute. They are ball bearings. There is no friction on that at all. That is really nice. You can't feel any of the joints here. This curve, and you usually can do this with your bare hand. You'll feel if there's a little. Your hand is a lot more accurate than your eye on almost all of these curves. Anyway, that completes the inner tip. We are closing in on having the framing of wing 1 roughed in. Now the next step on this is the outer tip. Joe's already made up all of the tip weight box parts. There's really no reason to hollow this out anymore. We're not going to be reducing the tip weight at all. In fact, he's got a piece of tip weight in there already. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to basically repeat the same procedure I did on the other side. Tape it in place, tack glue it, final sand it as much as I can. When I'm all done, put the tip weight box in for the final sanding. Now, you're laughing. I've had the tip weight box in and some of the thin CA wicked in and glued the tip weight box in. All of these potential little time bombs, they can all come back and bite you in the end. That's why it's always good if you can think about these things ahead of time. Try to picture the worst case scenario, because that'll always be the thing that happens. Anyway, and if I can get this on tonight, you know what I'm going to do? After dinner, I'm going to come back down here, work on this outer tip, because that'll pretty much get Joe something that he can work on. Because we actually have more time over at the rental we got to do, and I don't want to hold Joe up anymore. This is a joint project, and I feel like I've let Joe down a little bit with all these problems we've had, but I want to make up some ground in the next couple of weeks. Now tonight, as I was getting ready, I thought tonight I'd spend some time putting this outer tip on and doing a little more work. We had some terrible news in the family, and I'm not sure everybody can share this information, but we've had Stacy and Rob's cat, who's been part of our family for a long time. They took him to the vet this morning, and it turns out they have to put him down. He has cancer, so that was kind of sad for our family, and I guess I just won't get to do this tonight, since we're gonna do some family time tonight. Anyway, but tomorrow morning Joe is due to be here, and we'll hopefully have a better day than we had today. That was kind of a sad way to end the day, but I know everybody that's ever had an animal can relate to how it feels when they pass on.
And that's one of the last pictures we have of Murphy, Stacy and Rob's cat, who was a rescue cat. And I could be wrong, but I think he was about 10 years old when we lost him. And if you go back, God almighty, to a lot of old Windy original videos, you'll remember Buster. Buster is on the original Nobler videos. He's on, oh my God, videos from the old house that I don't even own anymore. The pets that we've lost along the way.
And this morning we're up before dawn here. Like the sun isn't even up yet. We wanted to have a nice breakfast with Joe Adamusco here. Karen's going to make some waffles for us. We're going to do some chatting about the Spitfire project. So early, the birds are just getting here now. Anyway, as always, we're looking forward to a great visit with Joe and make some more final decisions as to what we're going to do about certain issues concerning the upcoming Spitfire project. And of course, we always just enjoy a social visit, no matter what. We'll even go out and get the paper for Joe because we're such a good guy. Look at these trees. It's the last couple of days, and they are all going to be history very soon. In fact, we got some big wind coming through today that'll probably put the kibosh on a lot more of them. Look at that wind blowing already. No, the birds don't like this cold weather any more than we do. We're ready for Joe, baby. He should be here momentarily. And when Joe says he's going to be here at 7, he'll be here at 7. You can bet. You can set your watch on it. Set that Spitfire on it. For the first minute, he sees the plane. All right. There's always a smile you can't define. It's not like the smile of getting a new watch for Christmas.
Have some girth to it. Huh?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Pretty good.
I ordered a 2 3/4 spinner, but it didn't get here yet. Cause that's.
I thought you were going to go with 3.
Well, when I'll show you why 3 doesn't look like it's going to make it.
Yeah, is this our, okay.
One of the decisions is, that's a 3-inch spinner.
Uh-huh.
Where I'm thinking the 3-inch spinner is going to be a problem, then there's almost no ogive.
Yeah, so if you go down, you'll have that.
It's going to have a nobler nose. So what I want to have is I went to 2 1/2 and it has too much ogive. So I went to True Turn. They had a 2 3/4 that looked like, you know, the one you have on your spit. It looked like that.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, for $50, I'll give it a shot. See if it's, you know, if it doesn't look any good. I got all the molds out. Rich Walbridge wants me to make him up some molds. He's making a Seafire.
Stepping on something.
Oh, that's the bell crank to the other wing. Let me get that off the floor. I put paper so I wouldn't step on it. How's that coffee? Okay?
I know you can use that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Is that from
non-preg.
Boeing?
Well,
It's non-pre-preg, right?
Downgrade, Dave Downey, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I had this for years since.
Yeah.
But that's.
I'm trying to read the label.
Non-preg
Experimental.
toe, that ought to work for us.
Yeah, non-preg is good.
And okay, I know you can use this. Sickens.
Whoa, yeah, I can't buy that up here anymore.
That's why.
Bye-bye New Jersey to Sickens.
Okay.
Thanks to the government.
Let's see. This is all B25 stuff that Dave cleaned out his desk.
Okay,
or whatever.
they're all the
So-
templates and stuff?
Yeah, so that you can use. And this here is these are the gear blocks.
Yeah, well, I'd like to get them in the wing today, if that's going to work for you.
Or to, you know, at least get it to a point where.
Or to a point where we know,
All right.
you know, where we're going to go
All
with
right.
that.
So much for that technique.
Here's what I need you to do. Stand out at this end. Here, stand here and work the controls and tell me if they meet your standards.
Oh, you mean they're not smooth enough? You mean these things got a hitch in them?
No. If you knew how much time I put into getting this wingtip windy-ized, run your hand over that wingtip.
Yeah,
Don't
I
even
know,
look at
that's the.
that is hours and hours of work right there. That's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
And the guide is a single slider.
No, double slider.
Double slider?
Look in. You can. Don't poke your eye. This
I
is
know,
dangerous. Man, put tape or something on that.
Okay.
You poke your eye on that.
Where's your screw or nut or bolt? That's
Yeah. Well, I could wrap these today too. We're pretty much done with this.
What size screw you got in there?
440s. Then you got to take a little screwdriver, spread it. I mean, don't overdo
Yeah,
it.
because you're not doing this all.
You're going to do it one. And you know what? I measured where this is. This is where they all wind up. You're probably never going to adjust them. Now, what I did here, I had to cut the middle rib out
Yeah.
to get the belt crank in. I got the piece. And I didn't want to glue this in because I thought maybe to get the gear blocks in, you wanted to have...
True. Because
It's easier without this here.
Gear blocks are going to be out here. I think.
Yeah, but wherever they are, it's easier that you can get in there. Now, here's the dilemma, and what we'll talk about after we have our coffee.
Yeah.
I'll give you my ideas for making the horns and why I think they're. In other words, this horn is so wide; it's way over 5 inches.
Right.
If we just make an 1/8-inch horn, you probably will be able to tweak it the old-fashioned way.
Right.
But I don't know with lucky boxes. See, that's the part I don't know. Because the B25, I've never tweaked lucky boxes.
Well, let's see. Actually, if the lucky boxes in here are going to be that brass.
The brass stuff, yeah.
How are you going to bend that? And if you wanted to, even as a trial, you say 5-inch horn, you bend a piece of 5-inch wire.
Right.
You
Give it a try,
you
yeah.
take a couple of those brass,
Right.
You know, you showed me, I don't even know the right term,
Right.
but the K&S thing.
Right.
And you get it in there, and even if you put 2 pieces of balsa tom, or you know,
Yep.
this stuff, how hard you can make this with glass. I mean, you could really.
That's what I was
and
going
then
to say.
with the horn that much, you could probably, you don't need much. That might
But
be
here's the
way-
problem when you tweak something. Now you see you're following my line of thought already. Here, sit on a chair.
Yeah,
So
I'm going for
here,
some
here's
airspace here.
yeah. I put the chairs out.
I've been sitting for an hour and a half.
Yeah,
I'm-
but here's the problem, Joe. When you tweak, you never know if you're tweaking that horn or that horn. See, and if you've got dead neutral, when you got everything in dead neutral, you've lost your neutral then. That's why I don't like to tweak horns at all.
Neutral where?
But in other words,
Neutral, you know.
in other words, if you're tweaking a horn and you bend it, you don't know if this one went down or this one went up, or both. You never know that. And that has to do with how they tempered the wire and who brazed it. And then Jimmy's not going to be brazing these, I am, so there's the problem.
Well, why that be a problem? It's, you know.
Okay, but that's issue one.
Right.
If you make an adjustable, you know, like scissors horn, that becomes a little complex. But you know what I was thinking of doing? I'll make a test horn up first.
I think a horn that, and just
An ordinary
all you have
test
to do is
horn.
come up with a scientific way of, when you tweak, you don't lose neutral. What makes you
That's
lose
the
neutral?
point.
It's neutral between your flaps and your elevator.
Right.
You're not going to have an adjustable turnbuckle for the push rod.
Well, I have the thing with one wire on top of the other, like the other Spitfires,
That's,
which never failed yet.
yeah, that's one way of it. And then once you get that, once you get the wingtip level,
It's done.
and then,
It's done.
You're done. We found that
Yeah.
out on the other ones.
Yeah. So if you're happy with that,
I'd go with the simpler technology. And you know, the beauty of this thing is that it's going to be a take-apart airplane.
yep. The beauty of the thing is not as the other choice you have. If you really want to make this the next level higher, just make the flaps removable. Make a wire and the flaps.
Yeah.
You're going to tape them anyway. They're never going to come off. Then you can take the flaps off, tweak it with 2 pair of pliers like Miss Ashley.
But then you'd still be screwing around with
But you're still screwing around with neutral. If you make a
Okay,
scissors
so-
deal,
So what you just said there is that whether if you have removable hinges, flaps,
means nothing.
on with the lucky boxes made out of brass,
Right.
one's more work, one's less work, and you still might end up with the same thing.
Exactly. That's why we have these
And
days.
then if you go with like some kind of a double over and under horn thing that
Right.
you mentioned to me sometime this past summer that
It's
and you
annoying.
get you need
Yep.
so much, but your adjustments are
It's annoying. Yeah. There's no easy way.
okay. No,
Other than if you just luck out and everything works out perfect, the CG and everything. So,
I don't know. I think tweaking. Shit.
but
To me, especially look. The other thing that's in your favor, you got the long.
Oh, yeah, it's
the
long.
long span.
Yeah, yeah.
You got 3/8 flaps. You're going to have a brass.
yeah, the
Whatever.
brass will have no
It'll
play
be
in it.
buried in there. If you had to overdo it, you know, I mean, you're going to have all that, you know, your tube, your end grain, and you can glass. I mean, you can make the end of this thing bulletproof so that if you got to get a little extra shit in there.
You won't have to glass these flaps.
No,
That's
no,
some
I mean-
piece of wood you got.
Yeah,
You
right.
made this
Well,
out of
hey.
some piece of wood, boy. That is.
I went through the whole forest. to
Oh,
find
I
this.
know.
I know that was.
No, they're perfect.
Oh, I know. So these are not going to warp.
No,
You know,
no,
provided,
you're not
you know,
going to
we could-
have.
We could still do something to screw them up, but see, the thing is, and I know you don't have the benefit of. Maybe I took a photo that I showed you, but there's a reinforcer piece back there. You can flatten this whole piece you have that's orange. You can sand that flat, and there's still balsa in it.
Where it's orange, it's got to be cut out with a saw, because the horn has to be here. The horn can't be out here.
Oh,
The
yeah, I
horn's got to
understand.
be up here.
It's got to be on a.
And where this is in now, where the slop is, when I put the slop in there, you know, the slop. I mean, you can go up
Frequent,
and down. It's exactly at 1 1/10", which is a standard horn. Standard. Never had a problem with them horns. And if you make the horn a lot longer, what happens? The bell crank goes through too much rotation, and you lose all your leverage at the end. So that relationship between this and the horn is what gives you the nice feel that everybody seems comfortable with. I don't want to dink around with that too much.
Hey, and this. I don't think-
This wing is absolutely beautiful. I'm telling you. When I was working on it, it's like working on a piece of jewelry. Unbelievable how nice it. And it's torque resistant. You know, it never dawned on me with all these elliptical wings, because of the curve in them. They're very. It's like a curved fuselage. They're very torque resistant. This is more torque resistant without the silk span on than like a Nobler is when you got the tissue on it.
You got the long bars, and you got the.
Now here's the other thing with this relationship with the bell crank high. See how that misses the bell crank?
Yeah.
See how that just misses? Without that wire on top, if you use the old-fashioned kind of push rod, that's a problem. Or the other choice would have
Yeah,
been
having
here.
it on top. Let's see.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
off
because-
center by
because
6/10 of an inch, and
because
then
the-
you're down 6/10 of
Because
an
the
inch.
belt crank is so high.
Yeah.
High in the saddle there.
Yeah, it's 6/10 offset. I got this all written down in my notes over there. So the fuses are absolute. You could take either one. They're within a gram of each other. It's just ridiculous.
Okay, so these ended up being 5/8 by 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the only way you're going to get the ogive if you're going to have a real ogive going into the spinner. Or if you're going to use a 2 1/4 inch spinner, what's the point?
No.
You know, then
2 3/4. You got to. It's got to be out there.
it's got to have that nose, that big nose. Remember, this is short. This is only 9.2. So without the big spinner, it starts to look like a bear cat, you know, and I don't like that look either.
All right.
Now, one of the things I thought we could look at today, there's the old Spitfire mold from the turtle deck. If we had some scrap wood, and I'm sure I do, George Venturini gave me some scrap wood to make molds with, I'll lay up a couple of pieces one on top of the other, so you can make this thicker, 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 taller, taller, taller.
Okay, in other words, just laminate the existing mold.
Right, and then take off the thickness that you want if you want to do Razorback, guys.
Well, I don't know. Let's talk about that.
Or if you want to
What's
do
your-
bubbles, or you want to do one of each. I don't care about making molds. If I don't want to make molds, I just don't. I'll go work on my train set.
Right now, I think a bubble.
You like the bubbles?
Yeah, because for one thing, this is going to be like a Griffin kind of airplane thing, and I know they had high back versions, but a bubble, you said you could put more detail in there.
Oh yeah.
And then it could end up where the canopy can be some generic thing that there's maybe already out there that fits good. I don't know, but
Well, canopy. I'll get Midgley to mold canopies. He's willing to do that, and he still can at work. He just can't do it instantly. He's got to have time. See, if you go in bubble canopy, you can compare them. That's why I made both drawings. And you know what the good news is? You don't have to make that decision for a long time yet. The wing has to be in silver before you have to make that decision. You know that silver one that they have that has the red stripe on the wing? That's when I originally started this out.
oh, I already got my paint scheme in my brain. It's not. My airplane isn't going to look too much different than It's going to be It's going to be little.
The blue one?
Yeah, it's going to be blue.
Maybe I'll make mine blue too. You could save money on paint that way. You know what I would suggest you do? Just get Brookins a real good, picture with that color.
I already got my shit. I know you can do
He
pigments,
he does nice pigments, boy.
but it's going to be. I'm going to stay away from invasion markings. I'm going to have roundels on mine, but it's going to look like a British supermarine airplane. It's going to have that British elegant look to it. It might be a little on the simple side, but I'm not trying to make a stray for a bomber out of it or anything like that. But I like the bubble. That's
All right, that's easy. That's an easy decision to make. But that part is not. That's not something that you need to spend 100 hours to figure out. Even if you were to carve a block, just carve a 3-inch top block. Here's the hard thing: is getting this nose thing just right.
You got to have the spinner. You got to get the correct contour to work to.
And it looks like the one that's on your spit was what, 2 1/4?
2 1/4.
Okay. It looks like that shape, just bigger, would have been fine.
And believe it or not, that's not the lightest spinner in the world, but you could do things to lighten the act up on that. You can go to, aluminum. Richard has aluminum, aluminum washer, aluminum.
Yeah.
And then you gouge out, you clean up the back plate, or you can go with one of your back plates.
Well, we can do this too.
Now,
Once that spinner comes here,
Are
see,
you buying one that's already cut for 4-blade, or you get
2-blade, 2-blade to start with.
2-blade to start.
But we can just easily, where the hell's my mold? My mold disappeared. Anyway, I have a mold, here it is. As long as somebody makes a mold like this, and Midgley can make this, I can give them the spinner and get the mold back. And then the parts, this is what the parts weigh when you're done.
I know, nothing.
Nothing.
And it could be that
If we wind up
nothing-
nose heavy-
nothing will. I know, but
This is the ticket.
if you need a half ounce, you can cut
Yeah,
it the other way.
yeah, put the steel nut on and the steel shaft and
I'll tell you,
everything.
that's one thing I learned over this past summer flying is all the different tricks you can do to make something work better. But
Well,
yeah, it's so gonna be nice and long, big wide, something blowing. When you're launching that, you put your hand back here.
oh yeah, yeah. It won't be like launching a Nobler or
No,
something.
not like some
Yeah.
profile thing. It'll have
Exactly.
some roundness to it.
Well, I think it's going to be really. This is going to give us a lot of choices. Just having a wing down low changes the whole plane. If I lay out the plans to the Seafire where the wing is in the middle, and then put the plans out now for this, not even the same plane. And the big spinner, the low wing, and the dihedral is just a dramatic difference.
But I think this wing is it's a bigger wing
Well, here's what it is too.
than the originals.
It's higher aspect.
The dihedral is one thing, but it's got everything. It's just smoother all the way around. I think it's going to.
It's high aspect, Joe. When you see it, it deceives you when you see it with the flaps. You know how BJ was?
Yeah.
You look at it with the big flaps, it didn't look, but then you take the flaps off. This is really like, I'd have to measure it, but it's like a 6-to-1 wing. This is a high aspect wing. Also the dihedral, the one thing the Spitfires always do, they fly in a wind good. They don't do this wing rocking thing that, like the square tip planes do. And I think, realistically, I think when you're done, the only deal breaker is if you go and dip in an extra Bob Lampione gallon of paint. These things got to be 65 ounces.
Oh, yeah, right.
They're not going to be 80 ounces like some of these novelty planes, you know. These are
This is definitely not a novelty airplane.
No, this is
Designed to perform. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay.
And if I find pictures of that G-Fire, I've been looking everywhere for that G-Fire.
Well, I sent you shit like that to put on a disc. The color.
Yeah, but I'd like to have like the whole, you know what I mean.
Well, I'll tell you who would. Woolridge, a kid from Santa
Yep,
Barbara,
yep.
wherever he's from. He could find that. See,
He might already have it, yeah.
I've had some of those. I mean, it's silver and it's got.
It's a privately owned, it's
red-
one of the
red stripe and
52.
the red thing
Yeah,
on the wing.
it's one of the 52 flyable ones. See, that's one of the original ones that Dave molded up. And it's scaled, if you scale it to this, the canopy is a little smaller than you really think it is. Actually, that canopy is on the big side. That's like a,
Well, what I found when I tried to use this as a one-piece thing that didn't open,
Right.
it was hard to bury these edges and these pieces into your top block and
All right.
have them smooth in. If you're gonna.
so maybe what you want to do is get this size canopy like a SIG canopy and paint this
Okay.
on the inside.
Well,
Here's one of the choices you have. Now, I know you'll outdo me on this, but you can make the cockpit removable from inside the plane, because when you make a take apart plane, you just put 2 screws, now you could work on it. Oh, the pilot's head came off, put it back on. And supposing you get some other issue, do you want to put rivets inside the cockpit or something? You've got a lot of choices with that.
But okay, for a top block, for a bubble, it's going to have to, there will be.
I would say there's no problem finding that size
The thing
cockpit,
is, too,
even just on the
The
internet.
thing to do. Well, let's see. I sent you a true turn.
I got it. Yeah, I got it with
What's
all
that?
your
Was it a 3?
2 1/4.
Okay.